Time to put your galleons where your mouth is. By Tsume Yuki. Chapter 18. What more do you want? Elliot Greengrass considered himself a good man. For years, his family had remained neutral no matter what was going on between the light and dark factions of the magical community. The House of Greengrass always sat pleasantly removed from it all. It was the way it had always been. Right up until Elliot had met a young first year who looked up at him with gray eyes and asked had he not ever wanted to form his own opinions. That had been his 4th year, his first meeting with Turais Black, who'd been a strange child and grown up to become an even stranger teen. On the edge of becoming the strangest of men. He was a rare specimen, though. Powerful, certainly. But right now, Elliot had never been more afraid of him. Oh, he was certainly ecstatic for the overjoyed that he dealt with the whole Voldemort problem and taken the pressure off of the Aurors. But at the same time, he was bloody terrified of how the boy had done it. Elliot could accept the fact he may someday die, defending his country or of old age. He didn't really care. What he couldn't accept, would never have dreamed possible, was for his magic to ever be taken from him. The very idea left him feeling weak at the knees, and to know that there was a boy out there with such a power, he wasn't too pleased. However, it couldn't have been in better hands than Turais Black, so that was all good. The Ministry would no doubt be unhappy, but they couldn't touch him. The boy was not only the heir to the House of Black, and it was only idiots that messed around with that family, but he had publicly defeated the Dark Lord, taken him down as he was attacking school children. The boy was still a Hogwarts student himself, despite having been on the run for the past few months. If anything happened to him, the public would be in an uproar. Riots would be all over the place. But that didn't mean that the minister didn't want answers. It shouldn't have surprised Elliot that Black was as tight-lipped as he'd been in his own school days, if not more so. Black had been notorious in Slytherin for never giving up his sources of information and holding his cards tight to his chest until he could deal them to have the most effective blow that he could get. So he wasn't really surprised the boy wasn't talking. All the witnesses had been questioned so far, and the Aurors who had been forced to ask Turais Black to remain in the head of law enforcement's office for questioning. Then that had left them with the still very much alive and ready to be trialed he who must not be named. Only Amelia Bones had been brave enough to approach the unconscious Dark Lord in order to clap him in irons. When they'd marched Turais Black through the Ministry, no one had known what had happened yet. But now they clearly did. There was a crowd outside the office waiting for him. It was only because of the silencing charms that they couldn't hear the cheers.
I don't care if you think you have the right to keep it a secret. I want to know the spelling you used.
Mr. Couch had slammed both hands down on his desk, staring down at Turais Black as Amelia Bones made a scratchy noise in the back of her throat.
I want to know how it works, and I want to know now!
Why? Are you volunteering to be my test subject? Crouch reared back as if he'd been slapped while Amelia had to cover her mouth with a hand to stop the giggle that threatened to break free. Elliot grinned at the kid's cheek, even if Turais Black seemed completely ignorant of it. I've dealt with your Dark Lord problem, and you still want more from me? It's my spell. I invented it, and it won't fail. Voldemort loved magic. It was what made him feel special from all those other orphans he grew up with. Taking it away and then stuffing him in prison is the biggest blow you could deal him. Now, since you legally can't hold me here, I'm going to go home and have my first hot bath in months. Pop me a note for when I get my shiny medal. Elliot could only stand back and laugh as Black walked over to the fireplace, threw in the powder, and was whisked off to his home. No doubt he'd be back in Hogwarts come Monday. Now he just had to deal with the Dark Lord. This was clearly going to be a long day. You stupid boy! Harry froze up, his arms locked around him, pulling him into a hug with his grandfather Arcturus. The warm arms of Orion joined him next, a little mad laugh bubbling from the man's lips. But it was really Walburga that surprised him, sneaking into the family hug, embracing him with a soft, "Maybe you're not entirely incorrect," as close to an apology as he'd ever get. "So, are you upset with me?" Orion cuffed him around the head whilst Arcturus gave him an almost strangled laugh, pulling back to hold him by the shoulders and really inspecting him. The wound on his neck throbbed and Harry grimaced at the dull reminder that he needed to go see a healer. But much to his shock, Walburga had pulled her wand out and was now addressing the slash. He'd take the olive branch for what it was, tilting his head to the side so she could have better access to the wound. "We were petrified with worry that you would get yourself killed," Arcturus grumbled, but the proud smile still did not leave his face. "But we should never have doubted you. You'll be a fine Lord Black, even if your political views are a bit different." Laughing at the look upon his grandfather's face, as if he had eaten a sour lemon, Harry ran a finger along the new scar on his neck, offering a hesitant thank you to Walburga. She looked just as hesitant. But this new territory that was their relationship needed a little caution so that it would work out best. "Well, if that's all, I'll be going back to Hogwarts in the morning. You don't mind if I crash in my room, right?" "Of course not, Turais. Sleep well. I do believe you've earned it." Laughing, Harry twisted and took off up the stairs, feeling lighter than he had in months. Everything was coming up A-okay. Harry walked through the halls of Hogwarts and drew in a slow, steady breath. It felt great to be back. No matter what lifetime he was in, Hogwarts was forever home, always home. He knew the place back to front, front to back, from the ground to the ceiling. He made a mental note to pop down to the chamber and make a groveling apology to Asaira, probably best done with several cows in hand, and maybe a deer. She did so like venison, but Harry had always considered deer too good to be used for food, probably stemming from his first father's animagus form. But if it meant the 60-foot basilisk in the basement would be happy enough with him, so be it. The early morning sun was just starting to peek over the side of the horizon now, so when Turais walked into the great hall, he was greeted by an exquisite display of colors from the enchanted ceiling. He was the first student to arrive, it seemed, dressed in a comfortable sweater and the basilisk skin trousers that he didn't feel like taking off just yet. The teachers had looked up when he answered, and were all now making their way over. Dumbledore would probably be leading the pack if Slughorn was absent, but as it was, his head of house was the first to reach him and pulled him into a hug. It seemed like he was getting a lot of them recently. "Well done, my boy. I've never been prouder. You're a hero. Still just a 6th year, and yet everyone in Britain knows your name." Harry tried for a smile, but felt like it came out as more of a grimace. "Mr. Black." Turning to look at Dumbledore, Harry raised a brow, stepping back from Slughorn slightly. It was somewhat nerve-wracking to have all the teaching body of Hogwarts surrounding him, but Harry pushed it down, running a hand through his hair. "Yes? Congratulations. I must say it was a bit strange to witness the defeat of a Dark Lord and not be involved directly." Harry just shrugged, feeling distinctly uncomfortable. "Yeah, I just want to go back to being a student now. So, can I just eat my breakfast?" McGonagall gave an almost strangled laugh before she too pulled him into a hug. "Well done, Mr. Black. I don't believe you could have done any better." Surprisingly enough, the first student aside from himself to enter the Great Hall was Barty. The sandy-haired kid began making his way over to the Slytherin table and then skidded to a halt, staring in shock at Harry, who had no doubt that he didn't cut such an impressive figure as he had the previous day. "Turais?" Harry looked up with half a bagel shoved into his mouth, bright grey eyes looking up at the young Crouch in confusion. The boy had grown on him somewhat, and Harry wasn't afraid to admit he'd taken to watching out for the younger boy while he'd still been at school. Barty didn't approach him, though. instead dashing off back through the door while Harry blinked owlishly after him. It wasn't until 10 minutes later, when the boy returned, that Harry figured out what he'd done. He'd raced off to fetch Sirius and Regulus. And while he'd gotten to hug his younger brothers yesterday before the Auror had escorted them away, it hadn't been enough to make up for all the time he'd spent away. Tobias! The two boys shot forward, slamming into his body and throwing the three of them to the ground. Harry landed roughly on his back, but he didn't care, holding a brother in each arm and grinning when their own limbs wrapped around him. It was great to be back, to know Voldemort could never touch his brothers again. It had been worth the long weeks all on his own. It wasn't until he looked up and noticed the rest of the student body appearing and their gaping that Harry remembered how it was to be a well-celebrated Dark Lord defeater. Oh joy!